I give some words and after Don presents some words, you all have the opportunity to say a few words about my mom. Any stories that you remember, whatever, anything. Be kind to my mother. It's her 80th birthday. Oh, God. So, what does a daughter say about her mother? How does she talk about her mother in just a few words? Because Mom, after 56 years, you've given me such great material. And I realized, after I wrote my speech and looked back at it, that I truly am my mother's daughter. There's just so many things about my mother that are alike. We're both really outgoing, and we like to help other people. How we're different, one of the ways we're different is that we certainly don't have the same standards of cleanliness or neatness, and I'm sure you can guess which one that is. So, my mom was the quintessential stay-at-home mother. She cooked. She baked. Boy, did she bake. I bet Linda remembers that. I used to wait for the beaters, sit there and wait for the beaters and wait for the spatula because I could hardly wait to eat what was in the bowl. She also sewed, and she cleaned like the Dickens. Yes, you did, Mom. And my mom always tried to be helpful. My mom tried to be helpful in ways that some people didn't always appreciate. And some of you here know that. I will give an example from my own life. When I was a teenager, I was not the neatest person in the world. And so my bedroom would often get rather messy. My mom would wait, and she'd nag at me, and then finally she'd just go in the room and clean it up. And then it's up to me to be able to find my stuff. Like, Mom, where'd you hang my sweater? Mom, where are my shoes? Mom, it's like it was like going on a field trip or a scavenger hunt. So, I'm trying to remember if there's other stuff in between here. My mom's also really creative. I don't know how many of you know that. So, how many of you here remember the column called Hints from Heloise? So, a couple people are saying yes. Well, I always said to my mom that she should have a column called Hints from Gertrude. Because my mother always came up with some really interesting ways to fix life's little problems. Now, I brought a few props. One of them is this stocking, which I just stole from my mother's drawer. Now, one of the things we had in our basement was we had a washing machine, and that washing machine, emptied water into this sink. Well, my mother couldn't stand the idea that lint was getting into her sink, so what she did is she attached the stocking to the hose so that the lint would go into the bottom of the sock. That was like an incredible hint from Gertrude. Remember, Mom? Yes, she does. Okay. Another time, there was a leak at the top of Don's wall in his bedroom. You don't remember this leak? Remember the leak, Mom? You don't remember the leak? Anyway, there was a spot on the wall, and, your typical Jewish mother, what would she have done? She would have made a phone call and said, come out and fix the leak. But not my mother. No. She climbed into the attic. You don't remember? You did. She climbed into the attic. I don't know how she fixed the leak, but she did. She came down, and what she said was this: I'm no Jap. My mother was also an amazing seamstress. In fact, I have proof in here that she's an amazing seamstress, and I'll tell you how. One year, she and my dad drove all the way out to Seattle. She presented me with this Mod Podge Baskin-Robbins container that Allison Blakely and I, some of you know Allison Blakely and I, put together with many copies of the Underground Seed magazine, and her brother Ewing sold them at school. And she says, go ahead and open it, Lynn. When I opened it, this is what I pulled out. My Barbie. Now, I'm going to pass this around because the gown that Barbie is wearing was sewed by my mother. So please pass that around. And it's amazing. Recently I opened up the packages. It had all the little patterns. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how she did this. Just unbelievable. My mother also mother make Barbie costumes, but where she really excelled was in Halloween costumes. So one of the first costumes that my mother ever made for me was a pumpkin outfit. Now I was not really into this. I was 5 and I was really embarrassed to be a pumpkin. I don't know why, because it was kind of a weird, unusual thing. So what my mom did, she said, you know what, I'm gonna go as a pumpkin. She didn't care what I thought. She sewed this costume, I got stuffed with newspapers. And Mom, I don't know how I found this picture so quickly, but I went into your room and I actually found a picture, not only of me in the pumpkin costume, but of Larry in his bunny costume. Which I'm sure his children will really enjoy seeing. Well, what was really cool about the pumpkin costume is that when I got to school, the teachers loved it so much, and they put me in the front of the line, because when you're 5, they take you to
I love it, Larry. That's amazing.
I love that one. Also, one year, my mother decided that I was going to go with the table. Somehow, you remember that? She does. My mom she found this piece of cardboard that fit around me. She attached plates and cups and spoons and all this tablecloth to me, and my head was the centerpiece. I had flowers on my head. It was a great costume, but there was only one problem. Actually, yeah, it was only one problem. You see, in Chicago, we lived in duplexes and in the manor. And the duplexes had vestibules in front of them. Vestibules, for those people on the East Coast, would be like mudrooms. So you had a door to get into before you get into the other door. So what happened was I would go to the door and I couldn't get through the door because my shoulders were too wide. And after about a block, I was so frustrated, I went home, took off my costume to my mother's chagrin, and just put on a bunch of face makeup and continued to trick-or-treat and get as much candy as I wanted. Larry and I also won the Best Haman and Best Queen Esther costume because of my mother's creativity and her CKI. Mom is not remembering all this. She's got this amazed look on her face. So, one of the most embarrassing things about having a mother like mine is that she was extremely outgoing. She would talk to anyone. It didn't matter if the person was sitting in the doctor's office, we were standing in line waiting for food, sitting in line waiting to check out, or even on the street. So what this looked like is, and Mom, I'm kind of making this up. So we'd be standing in line waiting at the grocery store, and if my mom saw somebody, had some kind of item that my mom had tried and she didn't really like, she'd say, "Excuse me, ma'am, but you don't really want to buy that." Or. You know what? That's on sale. Make sure that you tell them it's on sale. Another thing my mother would do is that she would, if she saw a woman's purse open, she would come up to that woman and say, "Excuse me, ma'am, but your purse is open. Someone can steal something out of it." She knows that for sure. But my mother was also what I would call the self-appointed savior of young children making a dash toward the street. Mom, did you just hear that? Mom, you're the self-appointed savior of young children making a dash toward the street. My mom would be there faster than the actual parents. So, and when I thought about it, I thought, you know what? Last year, I had a similar situation. It kind of reminded me, it's like, wow, I've really become my mother's daughter. I was at the beach with a couple friends, and I noticed that there was this young child who's a toddler that was kind of teetering towards the water. We were at the lake. And the lakes in Seattle are not like the lakes here. They're not these nice sandy beaches or more rocky. And so the mother was busy chattering with her friend back here, and I was talking to my friend, and I had an eagle eye on this kid. And the father was coming in on a paddleboard. And so the child, of course, was like really wanting to inch out towards the dad. And at the last minute, I made a mad dash and saved the child's life. So, Mom, thanks. I think that's so much like you. It goes without saying that we were very well fed in our family. Mom, are you listening? It goes without saying that we were very well fed in our family. We would all eat dinner together, and dinner consisted of this. We had RC Cola. That's a throwback to Orthodoxy, because we don't eat. My parents were raised Orthodox, and drinking milk and meat together was kind of gross. And I still think it's kind of gross. We'd have either meat or chicken, sometimes fish, not very often. We'd have a potato, we'd have a side dish, we'd have a salad, and we'd have bread. And we'd have bread because my father demanded he would not eat unless we had bread on the table. And it was not uncommon for me to eat 2 hamburgers for dinner, or 2 lamb chops, or in my non-kosher days, 2 pork chops. So we were very well fed. Now we didn't have dessert right after that. That was for bedtime. Right before bedtime, we had either Jell-O or pudding. Then there was the cookie drawer. Now, the cookie drawer still exists. And as a thank you to Linda's father, Eddie Levy, Eddie actually built this drawer, these cabinets, in the 60s sometime. And so this cookie drawer, if us kids went into that cookie drawer before dinner, Mom would say, "You're gonna spoil the dinner!" Hey Mom, did it ever occur to you not to have a cookie drawer? Well, you know, it was years later that I realized that the cookie drawer really wasn't for us. You see, my mother has a horrible sweet tooth, so the cookie drawer is really for her. My mom was also born with eyeballs in the back of her head, kind of like that self-appointed guardian. We kids were so good, we never did anything wrong. It's like, I think we knew that somehow, if we thought about it, Mom would find out. In fact, we were so good that if Don did something, hello? If Don did something wrong, he would tell my mother, "Mom, I have to tell you something. I think I did something really bad." And half the time it probably wasn't bad at all, but and Don, you were just a terrible role model for your older brother and sister. Thanks a lot. And the one time, the worst thing I did was, my best friend and I, Nancy Darvin, once went to a USY event, and that stands for United Synagogue Youth, which was like the conservative movement in Judaism. We went to an event. It was like a temple youth event, and somehow we wandered in the kitchen and we found a bottle of whiskey and we took a couple of swigs. And when we got to my mother's house, she opened the door, and I swear we were like this far away, and my mom took one look at Nancy and says, "Nancy, are you shicker?" Which means drunk. If you don't know what that means. I think my mother's looking at me like she doesn't remember half these things. Mom and Dad were always on the same page when it came to finances, which is a good thing. My mother was not the kind of woman who would spend a lot of money on jewelry or spend a lot of money on clothing. However, that did not mean she did not love to shop. My mother loved to shop. She could vouch for that. She would go shopping every single week. Mom, you're not listening. Mom! My mom would shop every single week. She wouldn't hit the big stores like Marshall Field's and Carson's occasionally. She'd mostly go to TJ Maxx and Marshall's. Mom, you have to listen. Mom.
No sidebars.
Mom.
You're both deaf. What do you want?
I said that you would shop, you'd go to TJ Maxx, and you'd bring clothes home. But it was a good thing for Dad that you returned 95% of what you bought. You see, for my mom, shopping was a sport. And if she could find something that was marked down 10 times, oh my God, she was thrilled. And I still remember, Mom, I don't know if you're going to remember this, but you once brought home an evening gown that had been marked down to $9. Boy, were you ecstatic about that. So, that's the end of my talk. I just want to say, Mom, I'm so glad that you've been in my life for 56 years. I feel incredibly lucky, and I feel like you've been an inspiration to me to be the person I am today. I love you so much. Happy 80th year.
Excellent job, Lynn. Thank you.
Where's the picture? Photo.
You want to take a photo?
No, where's the photo of the pumpkin?
Oh, here.
Pony costume.
Well, let me just kick this off by saying that I, too, am my mother's daughter. One thing I realized while she was giving her little speech that's pretty scary is in some ways I feel like I married my mother. I mean, it's pretty scary. You know,